Hey, you probably remember me from this previous video. I've made some follow-up videos on that subject and they didn't get that much traction, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future uploads. Left 4 Dead. Quite possibly one of Valve's greatest works, right next to Half-Life and Portal series. Similar to games such as Call of Duty, I have fond memories of playing this game as well as its amazing sequel, Left 4 Dead 2. A large majority of people who are into first-person shooter games have seen or experienced Left 4 Dead in some way, with a large fanbase and more impressively, the absolute behemoth that is the modding community. Left 4 Dead was able to give people thousands of hours of fun and replayability. But how did we get here? As of this video, it is currently 2023, and the original Left 4 Dead game was released all the way back on November 17th, 2008. That's almost 15 years, or longer depending on when you're watching this. So it seems like the most appropriate action is to do one of my standard funny edit videos on this game, but where do I begin? Hold up! I know some of these videos can get long and boring. I mean, just look at the length of this video. I was kind enough to place chapters throughout the video, so if you're someone who wants me to just talk about the levels, then boom, there you go. Turtle Rock Studios was originally founded in 2002 by Michael Booth, Phil Robb, and Chris Ashton. The three were all employees of Westwood Pacific who were well known for their early Command & Conquer games before being bought out by EA. Chris Ashton was having a massive interest in Counter-Strike, which at that point wasn't even an official game, it was a mod for Half-Life. In fact, he was so interested he left Westwood to go join the mod team for Counter-Strike. This worked out pretty well because soon after Valve bought the rights to the mod and were planning on publishing it as a full standalone game. This all gets combined into Turtle Rock Studios, which apparently is named after the street where their first office was on, Michael Booth's garage. But hey, we all gotta start somewhere. This isn't the end, as Turtle Rock would soon be contracted by Valve multiple times to make games such as Counter-Strike Condition Zero, Xbox ports of the original game, Counter-Strike Source, and Half-Life 2 Deathmatch, all being absolute behemoths of the first-person shooter genre in the early 2000s. After doing nothing but making highly competitive shooters, Turtle Rock Studios wanted to design a new game, that instead of being the main idea that you wanted to be competitive towards each other, it would be cooperative. So how could they do that? Well, first, make the enemies AI, that kind of makes it non-competitive instantly, then strip them of their weapons. Get your mind out of the gutter. They then revamped almost all of the textures to give off a dark atmosphere. This was just a small fun passion project as they were planning on making a wizard combat game that was never really given a title because they dropped it that fast, claiming it to be geeky. So yeah, that small fun passion project is now the studio's full commitment as they decide to watch the movie 28 Days Later, a zombie apocalypse movie that takes place in a toxic cesspit of a world, London, England. And that's just what it was before the outbreak started. Okay, but seriously, the main thing to note about this film was the zombies. They were fast and aggressive, the military becoming paranoid and powerless, attempting to close off the city and quarantine the entire place would then turn into panic and morally questionable actions done by many. So screw the Counter-Strike engine, let's just do it all by scratch. This resulted in a zombies game that required the planting of a zombie bait and taking out the infected in an area, which again we don't have much on because it was scrapped that quickly for an evacuation type gameplay loop, having to constantly move through infected areas to make your escape. This small project was then presented to Valve, and considering their extremely positive history with each other, they decided to give the thumbs up and helped with publishing and funding of this project, which would then shortly after be given the name Left 4 Dead. Left 4 Dead was made using the Source engine, which for Turtle Rock Studios wasn't their first rodeo, as who would have guessed that Counter-Strike Source was made on the Source engine. Left 4 Dead was complex, that the Source engine would have to be changed so much that it was given a special version known as the Left 4 Dead branch, because it had to overhaul so many features within the regular Source engine, due to the stretching of the multiprocessor support to include split-screen multiplayer, graphical improvements, and many other things, with the biggest one being the AI director. And don't worry, we'll get back to you later. The game had a large amount of post-processing placed inside of it to give it more gritty and horror-esque look and feel. But looks aren't everything, as the big thing that needs to be mentioned now is the AI. Yeah, zombies. Or infected, whatever you want to call them. The Source engine allowed them to use physics-based animation to their absolute fullest, to give clothing and long hair movement to show off more realism. But besides the clothing, the animation had a large improvement as well, with pathfinding skills to allow the infected to lead in during a chase when you were trying to sidestep them, and their attempts to reach a player by jumping, climbing, or even in some cases, breaking. So the infected looked great and terrifying, with the same thing going on with the world and atmosphere. So now it's time to mention all of the cut content. Oh, here we go. This game was so heavily changed by playtesting alone, it's not even funny. Some of the biggest things that were cut were the Screamer, a special infected that would not attack but would instead retreat and call in reinforcements, which was scrapped because it was stupid. Okay, I actually don't know why it was scrapped, but the idea sounds stupid of having to chase something while being overwhelmed already. There was supposed to be a karma system that would give you good boy points for being a team player and a death penalty for being a meanie head. The levels were also heavily reworked multiple times, with some levels being split off into entirely different campaigns. Also, the levels were supposed to have cutscenes that were removed for replayability, as let's be real, I wouldn't want to watch the same 40-second long cutscene for the 30th time either. Unless we talking about this bad boy right here. Valve put so much effort into advertising this game. Posters, signs, contests, but the biggest thing was the initial trailer for the game, which was shown as a pre-rendered cutscene that is meant to show off the survivors before the first campaign even takes place. We are shown off a large amount of things here, such as obviously the main survivors, infected, special infected, and the mechanics of said special infected. Infected mobility options, infected trying to break environment, the main goal of the game, throwables, flashlight mechanics, alerting the horde, and many more. This was meant to show off the game, but also teach players how to play the game without giving a proper tutorial. I mean, it's not that hard, guys. Come on, just grab a gun and— oh god, what's that? Why am I here now? Is this even the same game anymore? This 5-minute video explains about 90% of the game's driving force and will instantly get you hooked on the plot, but I pretty much covered all the pre-launch things, which means now I have to talk about the game. Left 4 Dead has a fairly simple plot. The green flu is a highly contagious illness that causes aggression, brain functions besides basic muscle memory being completely erased, essentially turning everyone into zombies. On the rare occasion, this infection can also cause the cells in the body to mutate, and create a unique type of infected individual known as the Special Infected. You play as one of the 4 survivors, Lewis, Francis, Zoe, and Bill. Get used to them because they're pretty much the only ones left, unlike, you know, everyone else. These 4 are somehow immune to the infection. They can interact with contagious illness without receiving the green flu. They use this to their advantage to escape the eastern coast of the United States, as the infected states have been essentially quarantined. 2 weeks into the infection and the group is stuck in the city of Fairland, and that's when the intro cutscene begins. So now that we know who we are and what we are doing, it's finally time to talk about the gameplay. You play as one of the 4 immune survivors as mentioned before, which will get a proper introduction in a second, I promise. The campaigns are divided into separate levels that are marked by a safe room. Throughout the levels, you could find signs that lead you to the safe room, with even the player characters announcing the directions that they need to go to. This is not your typical platformer, as you need to be given a wide variety of weapons to fend off the oncoming threat that are the infected. Although weak, the biggest strength the infected have are their horde mentality. Taking out 1, easy. Taking out 50, not so much. Weapon options start off limiting with either submachine gun, pistol, or pump shotgun, but later on in the campaign you give a large amount of variety with full auto shotguns, sniper rifles, dual wielded pistols, and assault rifles. Besides basic weapons, you also have additional equipment such as throwable weapons that consist of either the Molotov cocktail or a pipe bomb. A medkit can also be found in safe rooms that give a large amount of healing but are rare to find during a level. Painkillers can also be found in levels that will give a temporary boost to a character's health in case of an emergency. Being injured means being slow, and being slow is a liability. Each campaign ends with a defense section, as a rescue option will then come to save you, but every time it happens, something goes wrong and the survivors once again find themselves in a new location, needing a new escape plan. I will go more properly into each level again, but I have been making so many promises to talk about things I need to start doing now. So let's go over the first one I mentioned, the AI Director. The AI Director, or simply referred to as the Director, is an AI learning tool that was actually extremely impressive for its time. Essentially, it would calculate how well a team was doing in a match and would adjust the difficulty accordingly. Were you progressing fine with no difficulties? Well, how about we give you less resources? If the opposite is happening, let's say low health and resources, with one player even being dead, the game will often be nice and give extra healing supplies. The AI Director would always be one step ahead of a good player and would be helping hands for new players. In my opinion, the Director is an extremely good example of difficulty done right in a video game, as the Director has multiple methods of changing the impact of a game, which gives more replayability. The 4 main survivors were not given that deep of a story on release, as their personalities would be given light as they interacted more with each other. They all worked best as unique to each other and having clashing and cooperative moments. Let's start with Bill. He's a Vietnam veteran who has seen the horrors of this earth already, and you can tell he is old with age but extremely young with wisdom, being able to become the backbone of the group, and you could easily argue that without Bill, the other 3 would not have a chance of survival. Zoe is the youngest of the group and is meant to have that Buffy the Vampire Slayer kind of feeling. being young and attractive like a damsel, but also strong and determined enough to take on her challenges head on as a protagonist. She usually tends to be the most worrisome of the group and wants to help when possible. Lewis is a standard office worker that wanted to change in his average life, and luckily enough, his world was flipped upside down, finally giving him the change that he wanted in his life. He's extremely smart, as he is already a junior system analyst, and overall gives an extremely positive view on the new world and the world they have been placed in. Francis is honestly the comedic character, having an overall sarcastic and cocky attitude towards everyone. His original description mentions treating this apocalypse like the world's largest bar fight. Although he does represent the chaos of the new world, he does enjoy the company of others, as his tattoos mention a club known as Hell's Legion, which shows that he was once part of a motorcycle club that was most likely as wild as he was, but would most likely have to leave them as they weren't as indestructible as him. These are the 4 main characters' stories for now. On release, this was about as much as we knew about the 4. This, however, did not last long, as the 4 were given a more proper backstory with the Sacrifice comics. But that's not all the characters, no. You see, the games gotta get through some variety with their enemies. So let's finally talk about the Special Infected. The Special Infected comes in a few varieties that tend to relate to their previous habits while alive. Let's start it off simple with the Hunter. The Hunter is actually not that different from regular Infected. They're usually seen cloaked by a sweater and are typically assumed to be drug addicts by the community before infection. Hunters are seen as extremely mobile and agile, having an extremely powerful pounce attack that will pin survivors to the floor, being unable to fight back as he slowly shreds them. The only way to take out a Hunter once they've pinned you is with the assistance of another survivor. If timed correctly, a Hunter can actually be shot out mid-air while pouncing, and if you're really talented, you can stun them with a weapon bash. The Smoker is seen as an ambush character that tends to take high out-of-sight positions and use its long tongue to drag survivors towards him so he can easily attack them. The tongue can be broken, but it has insane regeneration abilities and can be easily used again after a short cooldown. On death, they emit a smoke that impairs vision for a brief amount of time. This makes players believe that the mutation happens to people who are heavy smokers while alive. The Boomer is an extremely large boy that attacks by vomiting. This bile has a strong scent and will attract the infected if your player is covered in it. Not only are you going to be target number 1 for about 10 seconds, but your vision is severely impaired. He is, however, extremely weak, but explodes on death, once again sending the bile everywhere. The Witch is extremely passive and will sit down crying. This passive nature will end, however, when provoked by flashlights, gunfire, or survivors being nearby for too long. This will enrage her and make her charge at the provoker in question, and she will be difficult to deal with as she has the second highest health compared to the infected, and is commonly referred to as a boss infected as her damage is unmatched. If she touches you just once, you are downed. And if you're playing on higher difficulty, she will just straight up kill you. After that, she will retreat into the distance. The tank is the biggest threat to most survivors, having the highest health by a landslide and being able to solo entire teams that are not prepared. He is, however, extremely limited in reach, with only a swipe attack and a rock throwing ability that needs a long startup. The best way to deal with a tank is to distance yourself. If you're caught in a tight area with him, you can kiss yourself goodbye. The last gameplay related thing I wanted to mention is the audio, specifically the audio interacting with the player as audio, especially the music that helps guide the player throughout the levels. Characters will be given voice lines directing the player on what is around, either being progression or useful items. The music is also helpful, that gives premature warnings for danger approaching. Most hazards mentions will actually have a unique song associated with them. All 5 of the Special Infected have their own music when attacking the player, and some even have their own special spawning noise. The hordes of infected, when alerted, will also gain their own special music. And it's not like every player may be experiencing the same issues. Sure, you can be dealing with a horde together, but one player might have been pounced by a hunter, resulting in them hearing the hunter's pounce music and that player screaming for assistance. Almost all audio in-game has a purpose for existing, whether it's storytelling or useful information. We can now finally play the game after talking for more than minutes. So after everything I have talked about, let's finally load up the first campaign level for Left 4 Dead. No Mercy starts off right where the characters left off in the introduction trailer, stranded on a rooftop. Okay, they're not actually stranded, they can simply just walk down the stairs. This gives the player the simple introduction to common infected as you slowly and tactically move from one room to another to take them out. This is a great idea that would prevent you from being attacked from behind, because surely the infected would not randomly Okay, we can all tell where this joke is going. Anyways, now that we know that being slow and steady isn't winning any races here, it's time to move a bit faster, taking out the enemies. We need to get to Mercy Hospital, if you couldn't tell by the campaign level and the helicopter pilot yelling over a megaphone to... Proceed to Mercy
hospital for
The
evacuation.
first chapter isn't that crazy, just leave the building and walk down the street into a metro tunnel. Fairly straightforward, as it was meant to dip the player's toes into the shark-infested waters. Chapter 2 starts off with the group hopping down into a subway ticket booth area, with again simple enough design. Then comes the issue of moving through the subway tunnels, as this is extremely narrow, with the only option being to go through some of the stopped trains, which can lead to even more issues if something such as a tank shows up. Speaking of tanks, this is usually the beginning player's first experience with a tank, unless you were really unlucky in Chapter 1 and the director does a bit of trolling. Besides all that, you can continue on your day and come across this door. This introduces a new game mechanic. These defend for X amount of time segments are referred to as crescendo events. And if you couldn't tell by the music, yeah, that kinda makes a lot of sense. Anyways, flip the switch, wait for slowest gate in the world to rise, and run for it. After heading out the building, you can find not only a pawn shop, but also a safe room inside. Chapter 3 involves the crew going back into the underground again, but instead of playing Subway Surfer, they have to play League. Or at least that's what it smells like because they enter the sewers. A few standout points during this is the gas station. Its main goal is to blow up and act like he don't know nobody. Well, as they say in the Bible, oopsie daisies. Start this lift and enter this funky warehouse, which will start another crescendo event, this one being much easier to do as you can just place your backs to a wall and wait out the carnage. Heading through this massive facility and you can find a manhole in the center of the room. Just be careful of the witch that spawns in around here, because I sure wasn't. The sewers is a labyrinth with multiple directions to choose from, with the main objective being to find the service ladder out of here. It is extremely difficult on your first run, but after you find the ideal path, it becomes extremely straightforward. Hop out of the manhole and you conveniently find yourself right in front of the hospital, and once again, another safe room. Chapter 4 finally puts us in the hospital as you need to make your way to the rooftop. Fortunately, you don't have to ascend all 30 floors as you manage to find this elevator. I swear, this crescendo has given me more problems than any other one for me and my friends when we used to play this on expert difficulty. But yeah. This area seems fine at first, but they just break this wall and then they broke that wall and now they're coming in from the person-sized vents. What? It's overall not that bad, as there really is no special infected that can take advantage of your positions. And it's just an ammo dump with infinite ammo. So yeah, the elevator shows up, hop on in it. You get sent to the top no, wait, this isn't the top floor. Whatever, it's a safe room up here, it ain't that bad. Chapter 5 is the finale. Once getting to the top of the building on the roof will be a radio. After talking to the News Chopper 5 pilot, you need to defend yourself from 2 crescendo events and 2 tank events. After that, you need to make your escape to the helicopter on the edge of the building. A clean enough escape and marks the end of the No Mercy campaign. It is a solid first experience into the game with a large amount of areas changing from standard residential apartments to industrial districts and the underground segment. Overall, it's a solid campaign level and one of the best in the series. Death Toll, in my opinion, is one of the most underrated Left 4 Dead campaigns. Whenever you see people talk about the campaigns, they always overlook this one. And I have never really understood why. This campaign solves the biggest complaint I have seen with No Mercy, and that's the closed off pathways. There's just too many times that you'll be in a building from very tight spaces in the campaign, and it makes it too obvious for where the infected will be coming from, either in front or behind. Death Toll fixes this primarily by taking place in a foresty town. This is when you see the game at its best because you have no idea where the impending doom will be coming from. One moment you'll be moving straight ahead, and the next you'll get attacked by hordes and special infected coming from the tree lines. The first chapter begins in... Wait, hold on. How did we get here? Weren't we just on a magic helicopter ride? Why did he just land us in a random town with no survivors? There's no way he actually did that. Whatever, let's just continue on. The crew find themselves with a closed off bridge. It's closed because, construction issues. Yeah, sure, that's what we'll call it. After going around the bridge, you can head on inside into the tunnel. Good luck if a tank spawns in here because these cars get thrown around by them and they're one-shots regardless of difficulty. If you were lucky, this level is smooth sailing as you enter another safe room after getting past the other side of the tunnel. The second chapter begins... The sewers again? Man, I was just talking about how much I enjoyed this campaign and we're already reusing level ideas. Okay, but at least it's more unique by going through these massive tubes to progress through the level. Okay, after raising a bridge, triggering another crescendo, the survivors can make their way back to the surface, once again having to quickly enter another safe house inside the caboose of a train. The third chapter finally does something more interesting. As mentioned in the beginning of the campaign, this level is all about the forest. You are completely surrounded by trees pretty much from start to finish, having to constantly be aware and using audio to your advantage to understand where the infected are coming from. The first part involves getting out of a train yard by crossing over this caboose and onto some road. This is still quite standard with a house and a shack along the way for better loot equipment. But once we reach the end, I'm just gonna say this now, this is the most iconic part of the campaign. Once you get to this church, you manage to find a safe room, and for once, someone's in it. The man is paranoid, claiming that he had to shoot his buddy that was in there with him, and based on his mumbling, he was also bitten and scratched along the way. After talking to him, he somehow realizes that the survivors are all immune and decides to screw with them, knowing that his fate is sealed unlike them. Well, unless they're overwhelmed, of course. The scout from TF2 starts ringing the church bell, causing a crescendo event to begin, which, yeah, we've all been here, so it ain't that bad. After the bell breaks, however, you can go inside the safe room and find the guy is already turned within the last time speaking with him. He will also turn into one of the 3 non-boss special infected, which can catch you off guard if you're not prepared for it. The 4th chapter now takes place in a small town that you need to quickly make your way through. Although it's not that intense, it's important to keep track of the hilltops for infected, making once again another threat from the unknown elevations. You will notice the pattern for most second-last chapters that they're not all that interesting and they're just set up for the finale. The only thing worth mentioning is this makeshift bridge that you need to lower using construction equipment. Yep, almost got there. Yep, almost. Yep, oh god damn it, Dave. This will then involve you running your ass off into a nearby alleyway and getting a bit of the old parkour and into a safe room. The final chapter is Among Us, with the crew needing to get out of town using this random backyard and a nice little fisherman's house. In there is a radio, and yeah, we get it. Listen, buddy, I have 50 million power in Rise of Kingdoms. Okay, it's here. Alright, onto the boat, I guess. I just have literally zero clue where it'll take us next. I'm gonna guess a luscious jungle. In all seriousness, this is a really strong campaign level as it has some of the most memorable moments in the game with the church sequence. I think I have the best memory of this because I just enjoy the competitiveness of this level, and now you're asking questions like, what do I mean competitiveness? It's a co-op game, and yeah, I also enjoy withholding information from people for the sake of organization and planning. The game now finally makes sense for a player with a basic understanding of the game formula and how it works. So let's ask the question of how the next campaign improves on it. Dead air starts, and damn it, I was wrong. You start off on a rooftop greenhouse, although without proper care, these plants are all just shriveled up bits of nothing, just like my faith in Overwatch right now. The main takeaway is right at the start with the plane flying in during the intro. With that information, we know that there is an airport most likely nearby. And correct the survivors are as we proceed to make our way off the rooftops. The idea of having to go from rooftop to rooftop in a survival setting is so much fun, because you can see the actions of previous survivors trying to make their way across with little wooden platforms trying to make up for certain gaps. This is not the last we see of the rooftops, as this level is quite short, leading into a safe room inside of a hotel. Chapter 2 is called The Crane. With the shocking reveal to a grand total of none, you have to fight your way across more rooftops until you come across a crane. The crane is currently holding a crate with a ladder on it. This crane needs to be repositioned so that the survivors can access the ladder. It is a cool idea, don't get me wrong, but the issue is that it's the only idea on this level. I barely remember anything that happens in this level, and I constantly mix up this level with the previous one. In fact, before recording, I thought the crane section was in the first level. These two levels are just a mixed blur, and before I know it, I'm in the 3rd chapter. Chapter 3 takes place inside of a construction area and a parking lot outside the airport, and I think this is the best place to say it. Construction site level designs suck. It's boring and done to death. Like, whoa, look at all these materials that we can use to our advantage, like gasoline and propane tanks. And this isn't just in Left 4 Dead either. I just don't like the level design because it's meant to be heavily restrictive, because these buildings have to be in a framework only type development phase. Dear God, if it was something else. Rant aside, you have to destroy this barricade with this gasoline specifically. Weird, but it's done and sets off a horde. How? There are dozens of gasoline tanks in previous levels and campaigns, but only these ones that are duct taped together get the attention of hordes? Yeah, sure, okay. I mean, there's no point in arguing about game mechanics in a source game engine. I mean, I think I'd have a better time alt-tabbing than this crap. If it wasn't obvious, this level is not my favorite, but honestly, I will give it credit because after this, I really don't have any complaints. Chapter 4 is inside the airport as you slowly work your way around from the entrance to a boarding platform, which honestly, after my fair share of airports, I honestly can't tell if I'd rather go to a normal one over this. I will give the game credit though. Did I say credit? I meant to say was. What are these spawns? I just opened the door to start the level and I already have to deal with a tank. Yeah, this map. I feel like the devs were doing a bit of trolling with the spawns. In fact, let's look over the 3 dumbest ones from this campaign alone. There's this one, another one waiting behind a door immediately after a crescendo event, and this one just vibing in a bathroom. The crescendo event of this chapter is actually quite unique. You need to start off this van that will collide into a chain fence, opening up a path. Honestly, I will give the game credit here, as is where I took a few L's of the recording. This isn't the craziest chapter, however, being quite on the short side, if you don't get caught up in the chaos of the crescendo event. Chapter 5 gives you this. Alright, we peaked. Go home, everyone. Fortunately, this is not the only pilot around, as the radio begins making noise, and here we go again. Gotta call in the help to come pick us up from the bar, because there was a lot of cute girls there, but I approached them and they laughed at me, so I trickily scuffed off, but I tripped on the table and I spilled the guy's drink, so he punched me in the stomach, so I threw up all over his shirt, and then I was getting chased by him, but I lost him, and... Oh, wait, you're right here? Yeah, slight, and I mean slight change of plans, is that we need to wait for this plane to be refueled, but the gas pump is loud. So for once, the defense section is justified because the previous 2 maps didn't do anything overly loud. They were just talking to some people over a radio, and I guess when they say, I'm on the way, it just signals every infected within a half-city radius to it like a goddamn Discord ping. I hope you looked, by the way. Okay, but you know the drill for the defense. It hasn't really changed. The plane is good to go, and you get out of here. Overall, this is another solid map with a very awkward 2nd and 3rd chapter in my opinion. Surely, however, we will be able to find the ideal campaign with our last release day campaign with Blood Harvest. Am I right, guys? Haha! Right? Blood Harvest starts off, and again, where am I? Like, honestly, this one might be the worst offender. I can make up some sort of idea on how they went from No Mercy to Death Toll to Dead Air, but I have zero clue how you escape on a military plane just to find yourself camping in the woods. Regardless, the campgrounds are in a very mountain-like area, so you can get a good view of the place, and there's fog everywhere. Yeah, this kind of ruins the mood, honestly. I mean, yeah, sure, there are some good spots where it's used, such as the rope bridge part here with an unknown fate if this poor quality bridge breaks from the weight of too many people. That doesn't happen at all, so... Hey, look, a safe room! Chapter 2 is... the tunnel. Wait, hang on, isn't this the same chapter name from chapter 1 in Death Toll? Anyways, what you first have to do is go through a factory, which I guess hasn't really been done before, with the only thing being close to the storage facilities and No Mercy, and the conveyor belts from Dead Air's airport chapter. The survivors have to deal with a crescendo event, which involves their greatest task yet, an emergency door. Cool. Anyways, you can exit out the back and find yourself in a tunnel, and not just any tunnel, a train tunnel. Wee woo, wee woo, wee woo. You hear that? That's the overused alarm. What is that, like the 3rd time now? Fortunately, there's nothing worth talking about in this tunnel, even though it makes up the last third of this chapter, so it's time to press the fast forward button. Chapter 3 takes place in a train yard, and if you couldn't tell, I'm getting tired. For once, I can agree with Francis on something.
I hate train yards.
The chapter is extremely short in size, so the game is always throwing countless enemies to stretch out the level time. The only thing worth mentioning, as always, is the crescendo, where you need to undo an emergency brake, or something like that, which causes it to crash, which will knock down this bridge here. By the way, why was the chapter named after the bridge? Why not the train yard? Because we are clearly in one. Good question, because chapter 4 is called the train yard, silly. Chapter 4 is the actual train yard. I swear the devs were on something else when designing this level. I can hear them defending this level in my head.
It's not the subway level, guys. It's outdoors. It's different.
After you guys are done coping, let me borrow some of that copium for when the video goes public. There's no crescendo, and you really begin to judge developers on this campaign because only 4 campaigns in, and they're heavily reusing gameplay ideas. Chapter 5 finally changes things up with the farmhouse finale. In my opinion, it's the hardest finale because of the lack of resources around the area, making it an extremely difficult challenge. Is what I would have said if you couldn't just stand here and basically destroy the pathfinding of zombies. Getting to the farmhouse actually kicks off one of my favorite crescendo, Rose. Seriously, it's surprising how little animals are roaming around, and the crows aim to do just that. Getting too close will set them off, similar to a car alarm. They are hidden in the fields of corn, just ready to be set off, and with the infected being able to show up from anywhere, plus your porno vision, name still pending by the way, it just overall makes it a hectic crescendo. As I said before, this finale is hilariously easy because of the exploit here. You can escape with zero worries from boomers, hunters, regular infected, and even tanks. The only problem would be smokers pulling you off, but for some reason they just like hanging out here, so even that is rarely a problem. Anyways, you board the military truck and you did it! The survivors finally make their way out and escape the infection. Well, at least for the release storyline. With the smash hit that was Left 4 Dead, DLC add-ons were quickly put in development for free on PC, but costing whatever the equivalent to $5 is in Xbox points. Yeah, remember when Xbox Live and the Wii Shop used points for currency? There were only 2 DLC campaigns that came out. One was really good and would continue the storyline for the main characters and set way for the sequels, while the other one was absolute garbage and only existed to explain one plot hole. So let's play the game of which one am I talking about, starting with Crash Course with the final DLC to come to Left 4 Dead, simply as the last content update for the original game, as their team fully went on to work on Left 4 Dead 2. The entire campaign answered the question that everyone was asking at this point in the franchise, and to be honest, I was too. Seriously, how did we even get here? Yeah, they honestly answered why the sudden shift between environments with the answer of a completely new campaign. Turns out the helicopter ride did not last long, as it turns out the pilot was infected looking for survivors to help him. But he wasn't long for the world anyways, resulting in Zoe shooting him, and the chopper crashing shortly after, so now the group has to figure out a new way out of the city after landing in the industrial area of the city. This campaign gets a large amount of criticism for a multitude of reasons, the 2 big ones being length related. With the campaign being too short, only lasting 2 chapters, but also the 2 chapters being extremely long, where it could have been easily turned into a 3 or possibly even 4 chapter campaign. Campaign can be done in about half the time of a regular campaign if done without failure, but each chapter lasts about 8 minutes compared to the usual 5, so failure can lead to a longer playtime overall. Fortunately for me, I had no issues, mainly because I'm just playing on normal difficulty. Playing with bots at expert level is just too difficult, as they waste healing resources and were never given proper AI for using throwables. I actually played on advanced for most levels previously, but I did not want to restart these chapters in fear of wasting 8+ minutes for nothing. Okay, so how is the actual campaign? Not the best. The first chapter is very straightforward, having to blast your way through infected as always, then having to blow open a path with an artillery gun of all things, causing a massive noise and having to wait out the fire. You're a little bitch. You can just walk through the fire and lose like 90% of your health, but hey, I got to the safe room. Don't look at my teammates. The finale is already here, with having to once again go through 5 minutes of zombie slaying before even reaching it. The group needs to start up a generator to turn on the local power and lower the death ban 6000. Name still pending. It's another simple defensive area type finale, which doesn't do anything crazy. Well, until the generator turns off randomly and requires one player to make the sacrifice to jump down and restarting it, dooming the players and result- wait, no, this isn't the right script. Hold on. Jumping down and restarting the generator and quickly having to make their way back to the survivors, which isn't that hard, with a couple of well-timed pipe bombs which are readily available. The truck lowers and the group can hop on in it. This would then, in theory, lead to the group getting out of town until they get stopped by some trees, requiring them to continue on foot, which would lead to the start of Death Toll. Overall, a questionable campaign, but honestly I still believe that Blood Harvest is worse. Fortunately, there is one more campaign to cover, and spoiler alert, it's very good. For commercialization, Valve released 4 webcomics that told the story of the Blood Harvest finale all the way to the Sacrifice finale, with all 4 survivors getting an enhanced backstory. Lewis and Bill don't have the craziest expansion, but Zoe was forced to kill her father, which may not have been necessary because it turns out the reason for their immunity was most likely passed down from their father, making her mercy kill for nothing. And Francis being survivors with his old biker gang members, but they were not as indestructible as he was, treating the event like a giant party until having to part ways with the group for one reason or another. So what is the sacrifice about? Man, your listening skills are something else, because it's about a member of the group making a sacrifice. Chapter 1 begins with the group getting off a train. Okay, calm down. Okay, they get off the train, and the survivors actually need to go through the docks. See, it's different. With some train containers here and there, fine, I'll allow it. But you're on thin ice, buddy. A cool idea, however, is making a crescendo event that involves opening a container that was being used for research. What was in said container was infected, and apparently one said infected mutated into a tank. So perfect. We have to deal with a tank inside of this arena on top of the oncoming horde of zombies. Not long after, the group will find a safe room. Chapter 2 is quite long, taking nearly double the amount of time as the first chapter and the finale. I won't try to bore anyone watching this because we're right at the end of the video and I bet you're very tired. So to keep it simple, a few sections of the building act more as mazes than anything else. But a returning crescendo event appears with the crows. Yay! At certain points, you need to cross over to boats and water here, which can lead to problematic situations if you get caught off guard. This chapter can be painful to replay multiple times, but fortunately for me, I got through without having to restart. The finale is actually extremely short and also completely different compared to the average finale. All you need to do is start up 3 generators while being swarmed by tanks and infected. Simple enough because you can just power through this with the pipe bombs provided and you can just lower the bridge. With all 3 generators being powered, the bridge is finally lowered, at which you can then hop onto and begin raising it again. And it happened again. Alright, someone's got to go down there, but this time it's a one-way trip. Unfortunately, the bridge is not high enough, making it a death trap, and one person needs to go down there and make that sacrifice. Bill made that choice for the rest. He knew best that he needed to protect his people, even if it meant by killing others. In the webcomics mentioned earlier, Bill got an entire military base destroyed to save the other 3 and himself. Zoe hated Bill for that, and the rest of the group were starting to question his actions and his health mentally, as if he's getting a weird twisted fantasy with the only person defending him being Francis of all people. Claiming that as much as he enjoys his old friends, he wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for meeting Bill. Zoe, Francis, and Louis all wanted to go back to the life that they were living before, and Bill knew that the best, so he knew his time on Earth wasn't that long anyway, so despite all the odds, Bill jumped back down and turned on the generator. Shortly after, however, he was beaten by the tanks and dies from his injuries. This marks the end for Bill, but a new life for the others. He closes his eyes for the final time and rests, knowing that the others will be safe. But a fate worse than death awaits Bill. Dead by Daylight. So that covers the main story. What else is there? 2 additional game modes are a part of Left 4 Dead, with one being Survival, where the survivors need to hold out an area for as long as possible. Versus, however, is a 4v4 game mode between the survivors and player-controlled Special Infected. Also, can I just mention how every Source Engine game with a competitive aspect are somehow the most toxic, vile cesspit known to man? Like, come on guys, it's a co-op game. Why are you vote-kicking people for not landing a good hunter pounce? Anyways, let's start up a versus match and, here's something cool. The devs gave the community the keys to their map creator, so pretty much anyone was able to make their own campaign or survival levels, which led to a game with high replayability, well, now having infinite replayability. Unfortunately, these maps had to be downloaded from third-party sites, and they were most likely turning your PC into a ticking time bomb, but hey, we all had fun. Left 4 Dead is a dead game. Sorry, but it's true. But for good reason, as the game was so successful that they quickly made a sequel, and this sequel was so much better than the first, to this day, there's literally 0 reason to purchase the original game. I kinda wish someone told a 14-year-old me that, but whatever, it's fine. So that ends the story of Left 4 Dead. Very high highs and a couple of lows, but overall a fantastic game. I highly recommend purchasing the second game. I have hundreds of hours on the second game because of the high replay value and the better add-on system that uses the Steam platform for the maps instead. But I think I have talked about Left 4 Dead for long enough, and I can finally move on to greener pastures.